I'll try to give you my 5 cents worth comments in 5 minutes. So with my team, I'm working on real financial linkages, innovative new bank credit flow data that we're using, and we're also working on an agent-based model. So I greatly appreciate what you've been showing us. This is really innovative and exciting work. Still, I want to try to challenge you on 2 counts. The first, maybe this is most relevant to Iman and Stefano, I'm not quite sure. We need to understand where complexity matters and where non-complex factors may also drive the economy's dynamics. It may be simply the balance sheet relations in the real sector on the macro level and not interaction between micro agents which drive dynamics. The systemic risk may actually be in household and firm balance sheets, not in financial sector balance sheets, even though the financial sector will first experience some sort of a crisis. But you both still look at systemic risk as a financial sector thing. So I think we're more interested in the causes than in the place of breakout, and for that we must go beyond the financial sector. And also if banking networks would collapse without consequences for the real sector, I wouldn't call that systemic risk. I would call that a troubled sector with a couple of % employment and not a big problem for the economy. So I would challenge you to include real sector considerations. We can see this in the empirical work by the BIS, which show that real sector indicators such as debt obligations or household debt are good predictors of crisis. So that's where the systemic risk maybe is. And if you want to include that, my idea is that you need to start with 3 things. The first is that credit is debt. That's a macro accounting thing, not a micro accounting thing. So as the real sector takes loans, that gives us new purchasing power, so it leads to growth, but it also builds a debt. So at some point the debt effect overtakes the new purchasing power effect, and growth then changes into contraction. So that's the fact that credit is debt for the real sector is a major macro accounting equality, which may account for cycles. That has nothing to do with agents and interactions. It has to do with the financial nature of market economies. And this is therefore not a market imperfection, right? To have financial capitalism, to have market economies means to have financial cycles. So treating this as a market imperfection is a non-starter. You're not going to understand it that way. And also you cannot just include households and firms, because we know that another macro accounting equality, you know that the balances of the private, the public and the external sector sum to 0 by definition. So it may be that, for instance, the government trying to run a surplus pushes the private sector into debt. So the causes of systemic risk may even be in, government surplus policies, just as an example. So you need to bring in the macro accounting relations. That's my first big point. Try to be concise, but it's a big point, so it needs a little bit of explanation. So where are the linkages to the real sector balance sheets? That's my first question. I saw some stock flow consistent agent-based model very quickly flashing past in Sebastian's slides. I'm not quite sure what it is. So that includes the real sector, but apart from that, you all treat systemic risk as if it were purely a financial sector thing, which I think it's not. My second question, Iman said he could show you any network dynamics that you like by twisting everything a little bit, and anyone who's worked with this knows that this is true. So it would be desirable to anchor this work more firmly to real-world stylized facts, so that you can restrict the domain of things that you want to play with. And I've noticed also in trying to sell agent-based models to policymakers that this is a big problem that they have with it, and also fellow academics, by the way. Shouldn't you then take another approach than you do here? Shouldn't you first look at the empirical stylized facts that we know? For instance, I think of the BIS work that a high level of household debt, a high level of debt obligations is a good predictor of crisis. So apparently those are the macro features that signify fragility. So those are the red flags. And shouldn't you then try to build an agent-based model, or to make a network, devise the topology, in such a way that it produces the outcome that you know is a good red flag for financial fragility? Because then you're starting to use your micro work to understand the mechanisms that underlie the macro macro outcomes that you know are connected with financial fragility. And then you cannot just play any way you want, because it has to result in higher private debt, otherwise you haven't explained the real world fact that high private debt is a very good and consistent predictor of financial fragility. That's a different approach from what you did now, but could you reflect on how useful you think that is? Maybe is the question clear, or it's maybe a bit convoluted, but those are my 2 points. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, and I think